A single choice, made in a room thick with smoke and desperation, shatters the quiet veneer of a young woman's life. As whispered promises and reckless wagers collide, a dangerous truth emerges, one that binds her fate to a man marked by grief and haunted honor. A vow she never made now threatens to claim her future, unless she dares to fight for a freedom she was never meant to keep. Stay with me and let your heart be swept into this storm of duty, desire, and a secret poised to unravel everything. Tell me, from where in the world are you listening, and what do you love most about historical romances? In the dim glow of candlelight, the air thick with the scent of aged tobacco and polished oak, Lady Eleanor Hargrove sat frozen in the shadowed corner of her father's study. Her heart pounded like a war drum as the men around the table, lords and gentlemen with faces flushed from brandy and high stakes, erupted in a chorus of laughter and disbelief. The year was 1815, and in the quiet countryside of Kent, where apple orchards bloomed under England's gentle skies, such a scandal should never have unfolded. But her father, Lord Reginald Hargrove, a man whose once noble lineage had crumbled under debts and desperation, had wagered more than gold that fateful night. Eleanor's hands trembled in the folds of her simple muslin gown, the high neckline modest as befitted a young woman of 20, her dark curls pinned back in a style that spoke of restrained elegance. She had slipped into the room uninvited, drawn by the low murmurs and the clink of coins, only to witness the unthinkable. The cards lay splayed on the green baize, a full house for her father, but eclipsed by the opponent's royal flush. Lord Hargrove's face drained of colour, his jowly cheeks sagging as he stared at the winner across the table. The victor was the Marquess of Ashford, Alexander Thorne, a widower of 35, his sharp features etched with the quiet authority of a man who had seen too much loss. His dark hair was tousled from hours at play, his cravat loosened just enough to hint at the intensity beneath his composed exterior. Widowed these 3 years after a fever claimed his young wife, he had retreated to his estates in Kent, avoiding the glittering ballrooms of London. Yet here he was, his grey eyes steady, betraying no triumph, only a flicker of something deeper, perhaps pity or resolve. "You wagered your estate, Hargrove," the Marquis said, his voice low and measured, carrying the refined timbre of Eton and Oxford. "And when that proved insufficient, your daughter?" Lord Hargrove slumped in his chair, the weight of his folly crashing down. "Eleanor? She is of age, unwed, a fair trade for the debts I owe. The girl will make a fine wife for a man of your station." Eleanor's breath caught, a gasp escaping her lips before she could stifle it. The room fell silent, all eyes turning to her. She rose unsteadily, her skirts whispering against the Persian rug, feeling the heat of their stares like brands. This was no jest, no idle boast among drunken peers. Her father had bartered her future, her very freedom, as if she were a parcel of land or a prized mare. In the rigid world of Regency England, where a woman's prospects hinged on marriage and reputation, such an act could shatter her irreparably. The Marquis's gaze met hers then, piercing through the haze of her shock. There was no leering appraisal, no possessive gleam. Instead, a shadow of understanding passed between them, as if he recognized the cage closing around her. "This is madness," she whispered, her voice steady despite the storm within. "Father, you cannot—" "I can, and I have," Lord Hargrove interrupted, his tone defensive, laced with the bitterness of a man cornered. "The debts are crushing us, Eleanor. The Ashford name will secure your future. Better this than the poorhouse." Alexander Thorne pushed back from the table, his chair scraping softly against the floorboards. He stood tall, his broad shoulders filling the tailored coat of superfine wool, a subtle reminder of his elevated rank. The other players, local squires and a visiting baronet, shifted uncomfortably, murmuring agreements to diffuse the tension. But Eleanor saw the truth in their averted eyes. Society thrived on such transactions, veiled in propriety, yet here it lay bare and ugly. "My lord," the Marquess addressed her father formally, though his eyes never left Eleanor's face. "I accept the hand you've dealt, but not as you intend. Lady Eleanor will come to Ashford Hall, not as chattel but as a guest. Her freedom remains her own until she chooses otherwise." The words hung in the air, a lifeline tossed into the abyss. Eleanor's pulse raced. Was this mercy, or another form of captivity? Her father blinked, confusion warring with relief. "But the wager stands," Alexander replied firmly. "Your debts are cleared, but I will not bind a woman against her will. She decides her path." In that moment, as the candles flickered and cast long shadows across the room, Eleanor felt the first stirrings of something unforeseen, a spark of alliance in the Marquess's steady gaze. Yet beneath it lurked the peril of scandal, whispers that could follow her like ghosts. What fate awaited at Ashford Hall? And could a man who had lost his own heart to grief truly offer her the freedom he promised? The night deepened outside, the Kentish winds rustling the orchard leaves, as Eleanor stepped into a world forever altered, torn from her familiar life, thrust toward an uncertain alliance that might save her, or ensnare her soul. The morning sun filtered through the lace curtains of Hargrove Manor, casting delicate patterns on the faded wallpaper of Eleanor's bedchamber. It was the third day since that fateful night in her father's study, and the estate in Kent's rolling hills seemed unchanged on the surface, apple blossoms drifting lazily from the orchards, the distant low of cattle blending with the chirp of sparrows. Yet Eleanor felt the shift like a crack in fine china, invisible but irreparable. At 20, she had always navigated the quiet rhythms of rural gentry life with a poise born of necessity, her days a tapestry of embroidery, light reading from the Minerva press, and dutiful attendance at the local assembly rooms. She stood before the pier glass, smoothing the skirt of her morning gown, a soft cambric in pale blue, its high waist cinched just below her bosom, sleeves puffed gently at the shoulders in the current fashion. No grand silks for a baron's daughter whose fortunes waned. Her attire spoke of restrained elegance, a single strand of pearls at her throat, the only heirloom from better days. Her dark curls were twisted into a simple chignon, secured with tortoiseshell combs, framing a face pale from sleepless nights. Dark circles shadowed her hazel eyes, but she lifted her chin, practicing the composure that had shielded her through her mother's lingering illness 5 years prior. Downstairs, the breakfast parlour hummed with the clatter of silver on porcelain. Lord Reginald Hargrove presided at the head of the oak table, his newspaper spread wide, though Eleanor doubted he read a word. His once vigorous frame had softened with age and indulgence, his waistcoat straining over a paunch, sideburns greying at the temples. Beside him sat her younger brother Thomas, 16 and lanky, more interested in his plate of kippers and toast than the undercurrents swirling around the family. "Eleanor, pass the marmalade," her father grunted, not looking up. His voice carried the gravel of last night's brandy, a habit that had deepened since the estate's mortgages piled high. The debts, whispered about in the village of Ashford by Kent, stemmed from failed investments in the Napoleonic Wars, crop failures from rainy seasons, and, truth be told, too many evenings at the card table with neighbouring gentlemen. She complied silently, her fingers brushing the cool jam pot. Thomas glanced at her, his boyish face creased with concern. "Is it true, then, about the Marquess?" he asked, voice low, as if the walls might carry tales to the servants. Lord Hargrove folded his paper with a snap. "Mind your tongue, boy. The matter is settled. Lady Eleanor will depart for Ashford Hall within the fortnight. It's an honour, not a hardship." Eleanor's fork paused midway to her lips. Honour. The word tasted bitter, like oversteeped tea. In the stratified world of Regency England, where a woman's value lay in her marriage prospects and unblemished reputation, her father's gamble had upended everything. She had no dowry to speak of, no influential aunt in London to champion her at Almack's. Her days had been spent in the manor's modest library, poring over novels by Miss Austen, tales of wit and quiet rebellion that now felt like cruel irony. Friendships with local families like the kindly widow Jenkins or the boisterous Miss Lydia Cartwright offered scant protection against scandal's chill, yet amid the dread, curiosity flickered. The Marquess of Ashford, Alexander Thorne, was no stranger by rumour. 3 years widowed, his wife lost to a sudden fever that swept the county. He had shunned society, tending his vast estates with a reclusive intensity. Whispers painted him as stern, his grey eyes sharp as flint, his manner cool from grief's forge. But there were tales, too, of his fairness. Tenants thriving under his reforms, a library at Ashford Hall said to rival those in Bath. Had he truly meant his words, freedom until she chose otherwise, or was it a gentleman's ploy to salve his conscience? The meal dragged on in strained quiet, broken only by the butler's announcement of a visitor. "Mr. Elias Blackwood, my lord," Jenkins intoned, ushering in a wiry man in his 40s, clad in a sober frock coat and spectacles perched on a hawkish nose. Blackwood was the family solicitor, summoned from the nearby market town to formalize the arrangement. Lord Hargrove rose, gesturing to a chair. "Elias, good man, we've matters to discuss." Eleanor excused herself, heart quickening, but her father waved her back. "Stay, girl. This concerns you." Blackwood cleared his throat, unfolding a sheaf of parchments yellowed with age. "The wager is documented, my lord. The Marquess's man delivered this at dawn." He slid a letter across the table, sealed with black wax bearing the thorn crest, a rampant lion amid thorns. Eleanor's pulse thrummed as her father broke the seal. The room fell still, the tick of the mantel clock amplifying the tension. Reginald scanned the lines, his brow furrowing. "He confirms the debt's cleared. Ashford Hall opens its doors, but he insists on a chaperone, your aunt, perhaps, or a companion of your choosing." Relief warred with unease in Eleanor's chest. A chaperone, proper, yes, but it underscored her precarious position. Not a bride, not quite a prisoner, but adrift in limbo. Thomas leaned forward. "And if Eleanor refuses?" Blackwood adjusted his spectacles. "Refusal reopens the debts, lad. The manor could be forfeit." The words landed like stones in still water. Eleanor met her father's gaze, seeing not remorse but resignation. Outside, a carriage rumbled up the gravel drive. Deliveries from the village, perhaps, or more messengers bearing the weight of change. As Blackwood droned on about entailments and dowers, a soft knock echoed from the hall. The butler entered, face ashen. "My lord, a parcel for Lady Eleanor, from Ashford Hall." All eyes turned. In Jenkins's hands lay a small wooden box, tied with ribbon, no note attached. Eleanor's fingers trembled as she lifted the lid. Inside nestled a single volume, Sense and Sensibility, its leather binding pristine, pages uncut. A book she had longed for, mentioned once in passing to a mutual acquaintance. But pressed between the pages was a single pressed apple blossom, fragile and white, a whisper of intent or a subtle claim. As the flower crumbled at her touch, Eleanor felt the first true chill of the unknown settling over her like mist from the Kentish orchards. What secrets did Ashford Hall hold, and would they bloom into salvation, or thorns that bound her tighter than any wager? The carriage wheels crunched over the gravel drive of Hargrove Manor, but Eleanor barely noticed the sound as she clutched the book to her chest. The pressed apple blossom lay crumbled on the breakfast table, its petals a fragile warning of the path ahead. 2 days had passed since the parcel's arrival, and the air in the manor grew thicker with unspoken dread. Kent's late spring sun warmed the window panes, yet a chill seeped into Eleanor's bones, as if the orchards themselves whispered of upheaval. She paced the drawing room, her cambric gown swishing softly with each turn. The room, with its Chippendale chairs and a faded Aubusson rug, had always been a sanctuary, where she and her mother once shared secrets over tea. Now it felt like a cage. Thomas lounged by the hearth, pretending to sketch in his notebook, but his eyes followed her every step. "You cannot mean to go through with it, Eleanor," he said at last, his voice cracking with the uncertainty of youth. "Father's folly should not chain you to that hall." Before she could reply, the door burst open. Lord Hargrove stormed in, his face ruddy from the morning's ride, his riding boots caked with mud from the fields. Behind him trailed Elias Blackwood, papers clutched like a shield, and unannounced, a stern-faced woman in her 50s, dressed in a bombazine gown of unrelieved black, her grey hair scraped into a severe bun. Aunt Miriam Hargrove, Eleanor's late mother's sister, summoned from her widow's cottage in the village without a word of warning. "Enough dawdling!" Lord Reginald barked, slamming a gauntleted fist on the mantel. "The Marquess's carriage arrives at dawn tomorrow. You'll depart with your aunt as chaperone. Blackwood has the papers ready." Eleanor's heart stuttered. Refusal burned on her tongue, hot and defiant. "Father, this is no marriage contract. It's a wager's whim. I will not be bartered like livestock at market. Send me to London, to relations there. Let me find my own way." Her father's laugh was bitter, echoing off the panelled walls. "London? With what funds, girl? Our name teeters on ruin. The Thorn Alliance saves us all, your brother included. Refuse and the bailiffs come by week's end. The estate, the orchards, gone." Blackwood cleared his throat, stepping forward with the deference of his profession. "My lady, the document is binding. The Marquess honours the debt's clearance but stipulates your residence at Ashford Hall for the season, at minimum. No formal betrothal yet. Social expectations will align you closely. Whispers already stir in the village. The Ashford by Kent Gazette hints at a fortunate match to stem the tide." Aunt Miriam's lips thinned into a line. She had arrived that morning, her carriage rattling up like an ill omen, bearing trunks of plain woolens and a Bible for moral fortitude. "Nephew, this is unseemly," she said, her voice clipped with the precision of a governess. "But the girl's reputation hangs by a thread. Better Ashford Hall's respectability than scandal's stain. I'll see to her propriety. No lone walks, no unguarded words." Eleanor whirled to face her aunt, hazel eyes flashing. Allies! This woman who had rarely visited since mother's death now enforced the chains. Yet Miriam's gaze held a flicker of sympathy. Buried under layers of duty, Thomas rose, his sketchbook forgotten. "I'll go with her," he blurted, "as her protector." Lord Hargrove waved him down. "Nonsense. You're needed here, learning the ledgers. The boy stays." The room spun with arguments, Eleanor's pleas for delay, her father's insistence on haste, Blackwood's dry recitals of entailments and dowries that existed only on paper. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the casements as if the Kentish hills mourned the fracture. This was the rupture. No gentle slide into society's expectations, but a brutal shove into the unknown. In Regency England's web of honour and hierarchy, a woman's refusal could doom her family, branding her willful, unmarriageable. Suitors would vanish, invitations dry up like summer streams. The cost was not just pride, it was survival. As the sun dipped low, casting long shadows across the room, a knock echoed from the hall. The butler entered, bearing a sealed missive on a silver tray. "From the Marquess of Ashford, my lady." Eleanor's fingers shook as she broke the wax. The script was bold, unadorned. "Lady Eleanor, the roads between our estates grow restless with rumour. I extend my carriage and protection, not possession. Arrive as you are, free to depart when you will. but delay invites deeper shadows. Alexander Thorne. Shadows. The word chilled her. Whispers of the Marquess's past flickered in her mind, his wife's fever, the isolation that followed, tales of a rival claimant to his lands, a distant cousin named Victor Langford, whose envy simmered like unspoken poison. Was this invitation salvation or a deeper snare? She folded the letter, decision crystallizing amid the turmoil. Refusal meant Hargrove Manor's fall, her brother's future bartered next. Acceptance, a gamble of her own. "Very well," she said, voice steady as steel. "I go to Ashford Hall, but on my terms, no betrothal until I choose." Lord Hargrove nodded, relief masking his shame. Aunt Miriam packed swiftly, her bombazine rustling like dry leaves. Thomas hugged her fiercely, slipping a small locket into her hand, a family keepsake, his silent vow of loyalty. As twilight fell, Eleanor stood at the window, gazing at the orchards where apples promised bounty but delivered only debt. The carriage would come at first light, bearing her into a new world of gilded halls and hidden thorns. Yet as stars pricked the sky, a distant rumble echoed, not thunder, but hooves. Riders approached, cloaked figures silhouetted against the horizon. Messengers or harbingers of the scandals to come? Eleanor pressed the locket to her lips, the weight of her choice settling like dew. Tomorrow, Ashford Hall awaited, not as prisoner but pioneer. But what trials would test her resolve before the doors even closed? The carriage jolted to a halt before the grand portico of Ashford Hall, its wheels sinking into the gravel as dawn's light gilded the honeyed stone facade. Eleanor peered through the fogged window, her breath misting the glass. The estate sprawled across Kent's undulating hills, manicured lawns sweeping toward distant orchards, heavy with unripe fruit. Towering oaks flanked the entrance, their branches like sentinel arms, while ivy clung to the walls in elegant disarray. This was no crumbling manor like her father's. It breathed wealth and restraint, a testament to the Marquess's careful stewardship. Aunt Miriam stirred beside her, clutching her reticule like a talisman. "Compose yourself, child. First impressions linger." Her bombazine gown rustled as she straightened her lace cap, eyes scanning the approaching footman in livery of deep green and gold. Eleanor nodded, though her pulse raced. The locket from Thomas weighed heavy against her chest, hidden beneath her travelling pelisse of dove-grey wool. She had chosen a simple round gown of sprigged muslin for the journey, its empire waist allowing ease in the cramped coach. A modest shawl draped over her shoulders against the morning chill. No finery to proclaim her station, only the quiet dignity that had carried her through darker days. The door swung open, and a liveried servant extended a gloved hand. As Eleanor descended, her boots crunched on the path, the air crisp with dew and the faint tang of wood smoke from unseen chimneys. There stood Alexander Thorne, the Marquess of Ashford, on the top step. He cut a striking figure in his morning coat of navy superfine, breeches tucked into polished hessians, his cravat tied in a precise waterfall knot. At 35, grief had honed his features, high cheekbones, a firm jaw shadowed by the barest stubble, yet his grey eyes held a warmth that belied the rumours of seclusion. "Lady Eleanor," he said, his voice resonant, inclining his head with formal grace. "Welcome to Ashford Hall. Your aunt as well. The house is at your disposal." She curtsied, meeting his gaze, no overt familiarity, only a subtle nod that acknowledged the letter's promise. "Thank you. My lord, your hospitality eases a difficult road." He gestured inside, where the hall unfolded in polished parquet and vaulted ceilings. Crystal sconces caught the light, and a grand staircase curved upward, portraits of stern ancestors lining the walls. Servants bustled discreetly, unloading trunks under the butler's watchful eye. Aunt Miriam followed, her lips pursed in approval. though she whispered to Eleanor, "Mind the proprieties, eyes everywhere." Breakfast awaited in a sunlit morning room, the table laden with silver chafing dishes of eggs, bacon and fresh rolls, flanked by pots of chocolate and tea. Alexander took his place at the head, Eleanor to his right, Miriam opposite. The meal passed in polite murmurings, queries about the journey, comments on the weather's turn. Yet beneath the civility simmered tension. Eleanor's fork scraped her plate. She tasted little, her mind replaying the riders' silhouettes from the night before. Who were they? Spies for her father? Or something tied to the Marquess's shadowed past? As platters cleared, Alexander turned to her. The hall offers much for diversion. The library, perhaps, or the gardens. But today, a prior engagement calls. The local assembly in Ashford-by-Kent hosts a tea this afternoon. Local families attend. It's a gentle introduction. Eleanor's stomach tightened, a semi-public proving ground where whispers could bloom into thorns. "I would be honoured, my lord, though I fear my arrival precedes me." A faint smile tugged his lips, the first crack in his reserve. "Rumour travels swift as a Kentish hare, but truth has its own pace," Aunt Miriam interjected sharply. "We'll attend as family guests, no more." The tea was held in the assembly rooms, a modest brick building on the village high street, its interiors bright with chintz drapes and polished oak. Carriages lined the lane, disgorging ladies in bonnets and gentlemen in tailcoats. Eleanor entered on Alexander's arm, a necessary formality that drew sidelong glances. Her gown for the occasion, a white muslin with embroidered hems paired with a Spencer jacket of pale green, felt suddenly inadequate amid the rustle of silks. The room buzzed with chatter. Mrs. Cartwright, a plump matron with a penchant for gossip, approached first, her fan fluttering like a butterfly's wing. "Lady Eleanor, such a surprise, and with the Marquess, we heard. Whispers of a fortunate alliance." Eleanor's cheeks warmed, the subtle humiliation landing like a veiled barb. Fortunate, or pitiable, the bartered daughter? Alexander's hand tensed briefly on her elbow, a micro-gesture of support, gone in an instant. "Mrs. Cartwright," he replied evenly. "Lady Eleanor graces us as my guest. Her presence honours Ashford." The matron's eyes narrowed, appraising. "Of course, though some say Lord Hargrove's debts run deep. A bold wager, that game." Laughter tittered from a cluster of young ladies nearby, Miss Lydia among them. Eleanor's old friend, now eyeing her with a mix of pity and curiosity. Eleanor forced a smile. Steering the talk to safer ground, the upcoming harvest, a recent novel. Yet the friction lingered, class lines drawn in every arched brow. She was no longer just Eleanor's friend. She was the Marquess's ward, teetering on scandal's edge. In a quieter corner, by a pianoforte gleaming under the windows, Alexander drew her aside. "You bear this well," he murmured, his voice low, grey eyes locking on hers. A shared silence stretched, charged with unspoken understanding, the weight of unwanted fates binding them. Before she could respond, a figure detached from the shadows near the doorway. Tall and lean, with slicked-back auburn hair and a smile too sharp for warmth, he approached. Victor Langford, the Marquess's distant cousin, his eyes gleaming with calculated interest. Clad in an understated coat of charcoal grey, he bowed with exaggerated flourish. "Cousin Alexander, and this must be the lady of the hour. Charmed." Alexander's posture stiffened imperceptibly. "Victor, unexpected." Langford's gaze lingered on Eleanor, probing. News travels, a wager won, a debt cleared. How poetic. He slipped away as quickly, melting into the crowd. But Eleanor caught the glint in his eye. observation, not idle curiosity, antagonist in the wings, watching. As tea waned, a small advance bloomed. Alexander pressed a folded note into her palm under the table's edge, a simple card etched with a thorn-wreathed lion. Inside, in his bold script, the pianoforte awaits your touch if you wish, a sanctuary amid the storm. No declaration, just a gesture that stirred her heart, a brooch of trust, pinning their fragile alliance. They departed amid nods and curtsies, the carriage rumbling back toward Ashford Hall. But as twilight fell, a boy delivered the evening post to the manor. Among the letters lay a clipping from the Ashford by Kent Gazette, slipped anonymously into the pile. Mysterious arrival at Ashford Hall, wager or romance. Society speculates. Eleanor's fingers crumpled the paper. The shadows deepened, Victor's presence a lurking threat. What move would he make next? And could this budding connection withstand the gathering storm? Rain lashed the windows of Ashford Hall like a vengeful spirit, turning the Kentish afternoon into a blur of grey. Eleanor stood in the library, her fingers tracing the spines of leather-bound volumes that lined the walls from floor to ceiling. The room smelled of beeswax polish and old paper, a sanctuary amid the storm's roar. She had retreated here after the tea, the Gazette clipping burning a hole in her reticule. Speculation. It clung to her like damp silk. Alexander entered quietly, shaking droplets from his greatcoat. His hair clung damply to his forehead, and water darkened the shoulders of his shirt. "The paths are flooding," he said, voice low over the thunder's growl. "No visitors today, or tomorrow, likely." Eleanor turned, her muslin gown whispering against the rug. Aunt Miriam had retired to her chamber with a headache, leaving them alone, a breach of propriety that the weather excused, if only just. "Then we are confined," she replied, forcing steadiness into her tone, "like characters in one of these novels." He crossed to the hearth, where a fire crackled defiantly against the chill. Stirring the logs sent sparks dancing upward. "Confinement breeds honesty, or so they say." His grey eyes met hers, holding longer than convention allowed. No command, just an invitation to share the space. She hesitated, then joined him by the fire. The warmth seeped into her chilled fingers. On the mantel sat the book he had sent, Sense and Sensibility, its pages now marked with her ribbon. "This." "It arrived as a kindness," she said softly. "A reminder that escape lies in stories." Alexander's gaze flicked to it. He reached out but paused, hand hovering. "I recalled a mutual friend mentioning your fondness for Miss Austen's work. In truth, it was my late wife's favourite. She read it aloud during long winters, her voice filling rooms like this one." The admission hung between them, raw and unexpected. Eleanor saw the flicker in his eyes, grief's shadow, not the cold reserve of rumour. "I'm sorry for your loss, my lord. The fever. It took so many." He nodded, jaw tightening. "Clara was 28, vibrant like spring in these orchards. One night she laughed at a tenant's jest. The next she burned with fever. I was away in London attending Parliament. Duty kept me from her side." His voice cracked just once. He turned to the fire, shoulders rigid. "Guilt is a poor companion, Lady Eleanor. It whispers that one choice might have changed it all." She stepped closer, the heat mirroring the warmth blooming in her chest. No pity, empathy, sharp and shared. Her own wounds stirred. Mother's slow fade from consumption. Eleanor's hands helpless at the bedside. Father's absence in his study with ledgers and cards. "I know that whisper," she murmured. "My mother lingered for months. I read to her, held her hand through the nights. But father, he buried himself in debts as if numbers could mend what was breaking." Thunder rattled the panes, sealing them in this moment. Alexander faced her again, the firelight carving hollows in his cheeks. You carry strength quietly, not like the heroines in those pages, bold and unyielding from the start. Yours is forged in silence. A pause, stretched heavy with unsaid words. Eleanor's breath caught as he lifted a hand, brushing a stray curl from her temple. The touch lingered, a feather-light gesture, electric in its restraint. No demand, only a promise. I see you as you see me. Trust, tentative and warm, shifted the air between them. She didn't pull away. Instead, she opened the book, her voice steady as she read aloud from where she had left off. Marianne's heartbreak, Eleanor's quiet endurance. He listened, leaning against the mantel, eyes closing briefly. The storm outside faded to a distant drum. When she finished the passage, silence wrapped them like a shawl. "Thank you," he said at last. "Clara would have liked you. She spoke of freedom often, beyond the titles, the expectations." Eleanor's heart swelled, layers peeling back. He was no aloof Marquess, but a man scarred by loss, duty's weight bowing his frame. She no mere pawn, but a woman glimpsing alliance in his gaze. "And you?" she asked. "What freedom do you seek now?" His smile was faint, genuine, perhaps one where choices are not wagered away. He stepped back, breaking the spell with gentlemanly precision. "The storm will pass, dinner soon, your aunt will join us." As he left, the door clicking shut, Eleanor sank into a wing chair, book in lap. The intimacy lingered, a fragile bridge over their shared chasms. Trust bloomed, subtle as the first apple bud, but the reprieve shattered with a knock. The butler entered, face drawn, bearing a sealed letter on a tray. "For you, my lady, delivered by rider despite the weather, from Mr. Victor Langford." Eleanor's fingers chilled as she broke the seal. The script was elegant, laced with venom. "Dear Lady Eleanor, whispers reach even stormy halls. Cousin Alexander's generosities hide thorns. Beware the man who wins hands but loses souls. A word in confidence. Your father's debts were no accident. Meet me in the village tomorrow if you value truth. V.L." The paper trembled in her grip. Espionage? Blackmail shadow? The warmth fled, replaced by dread. Victor's envoy had braved the gale. What scheme brewed now? As lightning forked the sky, Eleanor clutched the locket from Thomas, the budding trust with Alexander suddenly fragile against the encroaching dark. What truth could shatter this fragile peace? The storm's fury had ebbed by morning, leaving Ashford Hall shrouded in mist that clung to the Kentish hills like a reluctant ghost. Eleanor folded Victor Langford's letter with deliberate care, tucking it into the pages of sense and sensibility as if the words could be contained by leather and ink. Sleep had evaded her through the night, the thunder's echoes mirroring the turmoil in her chest. Truth about her father's debts? No accident? The implications twisted like vines, threatening the fragile trust she had glimpsed with Alexander the day before. She descended to the breakfast parlour, where sunlight now pierced the tall windows, gilding the silver on the sideboard. Alexander was already there, perusing a stack of estate ledgers, his brow furrowed in concentration. Aunt Miriam sipped her tea in silence, her sharp eyes flicking between them. The air held a tentative peace, the intimacy of the library lingering unspoken. "Good morning, Lady Eleanor," Alexander said, rising with a nod. His voice carried that steady timbre, a balm against her unease. "The roads are passable. I thought we might ride to the village later, inspect the orchards before the week's end." She managed a smile, sliding into her seat. "That sounds agreeable, my lord. The fresh air would clear the cobwebs." Miriam cleared her throat. "Propriety first. Child, no unchaperoned outings." The meal proceeded with light conversation, plans for the hall's improvements, tales of local harvests past. Eleanor's mind wandered to the letter, Victor's words gnawing at her resolve. Dare she mention it? Trust him with this shadow? Before she could decide, the butler entered, his face pale as parchment. "A visitor, my lord, Mr. Victor Langford insists on an audience. Urgently." Alexander's fork paused mid-air. His grey eyes hardened, the warmth from yesterday replaced by wariness. "Show him in." Victor swept into the room like a chill wind, his charcoal coat impeccable despite the mud-spattered boots. At 32, he shared Alexander's height, but none of his restraint, his features sharper, animated by a predatory gleam. He bowed with mock deference, eyes locking on Eleanor. "Cousin, ladies, forgive the intrusion. Family matters demand haste." Alexander gestured to a chair, voice cool. "Speak plainly, Victor. We have no time for riddles." Victor settled, extracting a folded document from his pocket with flourish. "This wager of yours, clearing Hargrove's debts for his daughter's hand, poetic but flawed. I have proof the game was rigged. Your opponent, Lord Hargrove, colluded with a third party. Cards marked, perhaps, whispers in the club." Eleanor's blood ran cold. She gripped the tablecloth, knuckles whitening. "That's absurd. My father is no cheat." Victor's smile widened, oily and triumphant. "Absurd. I hold affidavits from witnesses at the table, the local squires, uneasy now. And this—" He slid the paper across. It was a crude sketch, inked hastily, her father passing a marked deck under the table, Alexander oblivious. Forged or damning truth? Alexander scanned it, jaw clenching. "Slander. You'd fabricate this to what end? The estate?" Victor's laugh rang sharp. "The estate, merely justice, but consider the scandal. If word spreads, and it will, Lady Eleanor's arrival becomes tainted, the bartered prize of a cheater. Society will shun her. And you, cousin, complicit in the farce." Miriam gasped, hand to her throat. "Outrageous! We'll consult the magistrate." "By all means," Victor replied, rising, "but delay invites ruin. I've already sent copies to the Gazette in Ashford by Kent, and to key families, the Cartwrights, the Jenkins, public exposure by noon." The room spun. Eleanor's reputation, already fragile from the wager, now teetered on this venomous lie. In Regency England's unforgiving circles, association with deceit meant isolation, invitations revoked, alliances severed. She was no longer a guest. She became the scandal's face. Alexander stood, voice like tempered steel. "Leave, Victor. This ends now." Victor paused at the door, eyes on Eleanor. "Beware the thorns, my lady. Some hands win nothing but regret." He departed, the echo of his boots fading down the hall. Silence crashed in his wake. Alexander crumpled the sketch, tossing it into the fire. Flames devoured it hungrily. "He bluffs, but the damage—" Eleanor's voice trembled. "If it's believed, I cannot stay. It poisons everything." Miriam nodded fiercely. "We return to Hargrove Manor at once. Your father must answer this." But Alexander's face darkened, conflict etching deep lines. "No, flight confirms guilt. We face it, together." Yet doubt flickered in his eyes, the budding trust fracturing under the assault. By midday, the storm Victor unleashed broke fully. Riders arrived with notes. The assembly postponed, Mrs. Cartwright's regrets laced with innuendo. The Gazette boy delivered the edition, its headline screaming, "Wager's shadow, deceit at Hargrove table." The article wove half-truths. Debts, the game, hints of foul play, naming Eleanor as the unwitting stake. Servants whispered in the corridors, even the hall's ancient portrait seemed to judge. Eleanor's isolation deepened, a fall from tentative acceptance to pariah. She retreated to her chamber, the locket from Thomas, her only anchor. Downstairs, raised voices echoed, Alexander confronting his steward, Miriam packing trunks in haste. He came to her door that afternoon, knocking softly. "Eleanor," he said through the wood, formality dropped in urgency. "Victor strikes to claim Ashford. He covets the title, always has. But this, it severs us before we begin." She opened the door, tears unshed but burning. "You doubt my father now, or me." His hand reached for hers, then fell away. "Never you, but the world sees shadows. I must ride to the village, rally support, stay here, safe." As he turned, the point of no return crystallized. No returning to the innocence of arrival. The wager's web had ensnared them all. Victor's sabotage had ruptured their alliance, forcing separation, not by chains, but by scandal's cold blade. Eleanor watched from the window as Alexander mounted his horse, thundering into the mist-shrouded lanes. Alone now, the hall's grandeur mocked her. A final note arrived by post, anonymous and stark. "Flee while you can. The Marquess falls next." Exiled emotionally, ultimatum delivered. What price would she pay to reclaim her freedom, or his trust? The fog clung to Ashford Hall like a shroud, muting the Kentish sun as Eleanor paced the length of her chamber. 2 days had passed since Victor's assault, the scandal's ink still fresh in every whispered conversation, from the kitchens to the village lanes. Invitations ceased. Servants averted their eyes. She felt the isolation like a vice, tightening with each hour Alexander spent away, riding between estates to quell the rumors. His absence carved a hollow in her, trust frayed, but not broken. She clutched the locket from Thomas, its cool metal a reminder of family ties Victor sought to sever. Aunt Miriam knocked sharply, entering with a tray of tea and a bundle of letters tied in faded ribbon. "These arrived from your father's study, child. Blackwood sent them post-haste, hidden away, he says, your mother's old correspondence." Miriam's face, lined with worry, softened. "Read them. Answers hide in the past." Eleanor untied the bundle, her fingers trembling. The top letter, dated 5 years prior, bore her mother's elegant script. "Dearest Reginald," it began, "the investments in France grow perilous. Victor Langford approached me yesterday, offering loans at usurious rates. He claims kinship through marriage, but his eyes hunger for more than repayment. Refuse him. For Eleanor and Thomas." Eleanor's breath hitched. Victor, tied to the debts from the start? Deeper in the stack lay ledgers, smudged with ink and haste. Pages detailed Hargrove's mounting losses, Napoleonic speculations gone awry, crop yields falsified by a steward's hand. But one entry leaped out, a payment to Victor, masked as consultancy fees. Manipulation. Her father's desperation hadn't birthed the debts alone. Victor had sown them, like weeds in fertile soil, positioning himself to harvest the ruin. Further still, a diary, her mother's, bound in worn leather. Entries chronicled Victor's visits. He flatters Reginald, plies him with cards and brandy, warned him of the cousin's grudge against Ashford's line. Alexander's father denied Victor's claim to the manor years ago. Revenge festers. A portrait slipped from the pages, sepia-toned and creased. A younger Victor, smirking beside a stern Thorn patriarch. Proof stacked like accusations. Victor hadn't just exploited the wager, he'd orchestrated the fall, using her family as pawns to topple Alexander. Rage ignited in Eleanor's chest, hot and unyielding. No longer the passive guest, she rose, purpose steeling her spine. "Aunt, summon the carriage. We go to the village assembly hall. I will not let lies bury us." Miriam's eyes widened. "Child, the scandal demands truth," Eleanor cut in, voice firm. She penned a letter swiftly, sealing it with Hargrove wax, not to Alexander but to the editor of the Ashford by Kent Gazette, with copies for the Cartwrights, Jenkins, and every notable household. To the esteemed readers, it read, "Rumors paint shadows where light prevails. My father's debts, sown by a serpent's hand, were no cheat but a trap laid by Mr. Victor Langford. Enclosed, ledgers, letters, testimony from my late mother's hand. He manipulated fortunes to claim what is not his. I stand with Lord Ashford, not as wager's prize, but ally in justice, Lady Eleanor Hargrove. She dispatched a footman with the missives, then dressed with care, a gown of deep emerald silk, its high waist adorned with subtle lace, evoking strength over fragility. No bonnet to hide her face, her dark curls pinned loosely, hazel eyes fierce in the mirror. This was agency, public, unapologetic. Word spread like wildfire through the misty lanes. By noon, the assembly rooms filled, not with shunning, but curiosity. Mrs. Cartwright arrived first. Fan paused mid-flutter. "Lady Eleanor, we received your letter. Bold indeed." Eleanor stood at the room's centre, Aunt Miriam at her side like a sentinel. Boldness is required when deceit strikes. Victor Langford forged the sketch, twisted truths to isolate us, but these... She laid the proofs on a table, letters unfurled, ledgers open, the portrait propped as evidence. Reveal his plot. He envied Ashford's legacy, bled my family dry to force this chaos. Murmurs rippled. Miss Lydia stepped forward, eyes wide. "My father saw Victor at the club that night, slipping notes. It fits." The door swung open then. Alexander, entering amid the hush. Dust clung to his riding coat, grey eyes scanning the crowd before locking on her. He had ridden through the night, gathering his own witnesses, a tenant's affidavit, a banker's note tracing Victor's loans. But seeing her, poised, commanding, he paused, admiration flickering. "Eleanor," he said softly, joining her at the table. "You uncovered the heart of it." She met his gaze, the reapproximation quiet, profound. No grand declarations, trust rebuilt in shared resolve. His hand brushed hers under the table's edge, a contained gesture speaking of guilt lifted, duty shared. "I doubted the shadows," he murmured. "Not you, this reframes everything." Hope peaked as nods turned to outrage. "That snake!" Mrs. Cartwright spat. "Exposed at last!" The room buzzed with indignation, Victor's name a curse on lips. He had played them all, debts as weapons, family as shields, building an empire on lies. The public's fury swelled, a tide against him, yet danger shadowed the victory. A rider burst in, breathless. "Victor, he's fled to London, but not before sending word. Challenges the Marquess to a public reckoning at the county ball tomorrow night. Demands arbitration before the Assembly of Lords." Eleanor's pulse raced. Advance met with greater threat. Victor's cornered venom. Alexander's jaw set, but his eyes held hers. Alliance forged anew. The ball loomed, decisive as a blade. Would truth prevail, or would Victor's final strike draw blood? The grand ballroom of the Ashford Assembly glittered under a canopy of beeswax candles, their flames dancing in crystal chandeliers that cast a warm glow over the polished oak floors. It was the height of the Kentish social season, 1815, and the county's elite had gathered in a swirl of silk gowns and embroidered waistcoats, ladies with upswept curls adorned in pearls, gentlemen in crisp cravats and tailcoats. The air hummed with the strains of a string quartet playing a lively country dance, mingled with the scent of hothouse roses and French perfume. Yet beneath the elegance, tension coiled like a spring. Whispers of the scandal rippled through the crowd. The wager, the debts, Victor Langford's bold challenge for arbitration before this very assembly. Eleanor descended the sweeping staircase on Alexander's arm, her heart pounding in rhythm with the music. She had chosen her gown with deliberate care, a deep sapphire silk that hugged her high waist and flowed in soft layers to the floor, its modest neckline edged with delicate lace. A single strand of pearls graced her throat, and her dark curls were pinned with a simple comb, allowing a few tendrils to frame her face. No longer the shadowed guest, she stood tall, hazel eyes steady. Alexander, resplendent in black superfine with silver buttons, matched her poise. His grey eyes met hers briefly, a silent vow passing between them amid the sea of curious faces. Aunt Miriam trailed behind, her bombazine a stark contrast, nodding to acquaintances with forced civility. The room parted slightly as they entered, conversations dipping into hushed tones. Mrs. Cartwright fanned herself vigorously near the punch bowl, her eyes darting. "The nerve of Langford," she murmured to a cluster of matrons. "Demanding a public reckoning here? It's unseemly." Victor Langford held court near the fireplace, his lean frame cutting a sharp figure in a burgundy coat. Auburn hair slicked back. Flanked by two burly companions, hired witnesses, no doubt, he nursed a glass of claret, his smile a blade. At 32, his charm masked the venom Eleanor now knew too well. He spotted them and raised his glass in mock toast. "Cousin Alexander, Lady Eleanor, the stars of our little drama arrive." Alexander's grip tightened on her arm, protective yet restrained. "Victor, your challenge is noted, but this is no courtroom. Speak your piece and let the assembly judge." The music faltered to a close and the dancers stilled, sensing the shift. The master of ceremonies, a portly squire with a booming voice, called for order. "Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Langford requests a moment for family matters. Proceed with decorum." Victor stepped forward, his voice carrying with theatrical clarity. "Honoured guests, you've heard the tales. The wager at Hargrove Manor, debts cleared for a lady's hand. But deceit lurks beneath. I bring proof." He gestured to one companion, a shifty-eyed man in an ill-fitting frock coat. "Mr. Wilkins here witnessed the game, cards marked by Lord Hargrove himself, in collusion with outside hands. And this," he unfurled a dossier of papers, yellowed and stamped with false seals. Letters forging Alexander's endorsement of the debts. A conspiracy to seize Ashford lands through scandal. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Miss Lydia clutched her fan, eyes wide on Eleanor. Mrs. Jenkins, the kindly widow, shook her head in disbelief. Victor's sabotage landed like a thunderclap, letters that painted Alexander as complicit, a false witness swearing to the cheat. In this public forum, where reputations rose or fell on a whisper, it was devastating. Eleanor's cheeks burned under the stares. From respected guest to tainted accomplice in an instant, Victor turned to her, eyes gleaming. "Lady Eleanor, you stand at the centre. Will you defend a fraud, or step aside and let justice prevail?" The room held its breath. Alexander's jaw clenched. But before he could speak, Eleanor straightened, releasing his arm. This was the choice, moral, defining. Not flight, not silence, but truth wielded like a weapon. "Mr. Langford," she said, her voice clear and unwavering, cutting through the murmurs. "Your proofs are as forged as your conscience. You orchestrated this from the shadows, bleeding my family dry with tainted loans, pushing my father to desperation." She signaled to the door where Aunt Miriam had stationed a footman. He entered bearing a velvet-lined case, the proofs from her mother's letters, the ledgers, the portrait, now joined by Alexander's own evidence. A banker's affidavit, tracing Victor's usurious payments, and a sworn statement from the original card dealer, coerced by Victor, but now recanting under threat of exposure. "These," Eleanor continued, laying them on a nearby table with deliberate grace, "show your hand, loans disguised as aid, ledgers doctored to inflate debts. You envied Ashford's legacy, sowed ruin in Hargrove soil to claim it through chaos. My father wagered in folly, yes, but you dealt the cards." The assembly surged forward, peering at the documents. Mrs. Cartwright snatched a letter, her face paling. "This signature, it's Victor's style. And the banker said, I know him, reputable." Alexander stepped beside Eleanor, his voice steady as he added his piece. "Victor's grudge stems from my father's denial of his false claim years ago. He struck at innocence to wound me, no more." Victor blanched, his composure cracking. "Lies, that witness—" The false witness, Wilkins, shifted uneasily, sweat beading on his brow. Under the crowd's glare, he crumpled. "It's true, sir. Langford paid me to lie, forced my hand." Outrage erupted. "Traitor!" a gentleman bellowed. "Scoundrel!" Ladies turned away, fans snapping shut. Victor backed toward the door, dossier forgotten, his face ashen. The community's reframe was swift, from Eleanor's humiliation to her triumph, the bartered daughter, now the unyielding champion. Applause swelled, mingled with jeers at Victor's retreat. He fled into the night, tail between his legs. His schemes shattered in public view. Eleanor exhaled, the weight lifting like mist burned by dawn. Alexander's hand found hers under the table's edge, a tacit commitment. Alliance sealed in victory, no words needed. The music resumed, brighter now, as couples swirled back into dance. She was no longer shadowed, she shone, respected, her choice defining her as equal, unbreakable. The euphoria crested, a cathartic wave washing over the hall. If you're loving this tale of triumph and romance, hit that subscribe button right now so you don't miss another heart-pounding story from the channel. Yet as the evening waned, in the quiet alcove by the terrace doors, Alexander drew her close. The crowd's roar faded to a hush. "You've given me more than freedom," he whispered, his breath warm against her ear. "A future worth claiming." His fingers intertwined with hers, a silent promise amid the post-storm calm. But outside, in the moonlit gardens, a lone figure lingered. Victor's discarded dossier, perhaps, or a final whisper of unrest. What loose thread might yet unravel their hard-won peace? The moon hung high over Ashford Hall, bathing the Kentish gardens in silver light, as Eleanor and Alexander stepped onto the terrace, the ballroom's revelry fading to a distant hum. The night's triumph still pulsed in her veins, the crowd's cheers, Victor's humiliated flight, but a quiet resolve settled now, weaving their paths into something enduring. Alexander's hand remained warm in hers, a tether forged not in desperation, but choice. No whispers of wager or scandal lingered here, only the rustle of leaves and the faint scent of night-blooming jasmine. Inside the hall, the legal threads unraveled swiftly. By dawn, Alexander's solicitor, a sharp-eyed man named Mr. Hargreaves, arrived with parchments in hand. Victor's schemes collapsed under scrutiny, the forged letters traced to his London contacts, the coerced witness recanting fully in a sworn deposition. The magistrate, roused from his bed by urgent missives, issued warrants for fraud and extortion. Victor, cornered in a dingy inn on the road to the capital, faced arrest by midday. No trial dragged the affair. He confessed in a bid for mercy, his envious plot laid bare. Years of manipulated loans, planted rumours, all to usurp Ashford's legacy denied him by Alexander's father. Exile followed, swift and absolute. Victor's remaining assets, scant after his gambles, were seized to repay the Hargroves' deepest debts. He departed England on a packet ship to the continent, stripped of title claims, his name a byword for treachery in Kent's drawing rooms. No sympathy stirred for him. Even neutral acquaintances, like the squires who once gamed with him, turned away, their positions realigned in the wake of truth. Lord Reginald Hargrove arrived at Ashford Hall 2 days later, his carriage creaking under the weight of shame. Eleanor met him in the morning room, sunlight streaming through the tall windows onto the polished mahogany table. He looked diminished, his paunch sagging further, eyes red-rimmed from a sleepless journey. Thomas trailed behind, taller now in his youth, clutching his sketchbook like a shield. "Eleanor," her father rasped, voice thick with regret. "I've been a fool. The debts. Victor's web ensnared me long before that cursed game. Can you forgive a wretched man?" She studied him, the girl who once trembled now standing firm, her posture a testament to growth. Compassion tempered her resolve. She saw not just the gambler, but the widower broken by loss, much like Alexander. Forgiveness comes with change, Father. The orchards at home will thrive again. Alexander has pledged aid without strings, but you must step back from the cards for Thomas's sake. Reginald nodded, tears tracing his jowls. I swear it. Blackwood draws up the papers today. The estate secured, no more shadows. Thomas embraced her then, his lanky arms fierce. You're a hero, sis. Father's learning the ledgers proper now. Aunt Miriam, ever the sentinel, received her reward. A modest cottage on Ashford lands, furnished with books and quietude, her role in the proofs earning quiet gratitude. Mrs. Cartwright and Miss Lydia, key allies in the assembly, found invitations flowing anew, teas at the hall, positions elevated in the social weave. Even the widow Jenkins, neutral till the end, hosted a charitable sewing circle, her neutrality blooming into steadfast friendship. As the family ties mended, Eleanor and Alexander sealed their bond in the library, the room where trust had first kindled. No grand ceremony marked it. Instead, a simple ritual amid the shelves. He presented a ring, plain gold, unadorned by heirlooms or past ghosts, chosen fresh from a Canterbury jeweller. This is ours alone, he said, slipping it onto her finger. His grey eyes, once shadowed by grief, now shone with clear intent. Not won, but given. Will you have me, Eleanor, as equal in freedom and heart? Her voice, steady and compassionate, carried the leadership she had claimed. Yes, Alexander, for the man who saw my worth beyond the wager and the future we build together. Their lips met then, a kiss born of love, soft yet profound, sealing vows unspoken but unbreakable. No passion's fire, but a quiet flame, enduring as the hall's ancient oaks. Their transformation shone in the days that followed. Alexander, once reclusive, led reforms with renewed vigour. A village school founded from the scandal's remnants, funded by victors' forfeits, where children like Thomas could learn beyond ledgers. Eleanor, her voice now a force in assemblies, championed widows' rights, drawing from her mother's letters to advocate for protections against predatory loans. Together they walked the orchards, hands linked, discussing expansions. A library wing added to the hall, open to locals, stocked with volumes like Sense and Sensibility, symbols of escape and strength. The new equilibrium settled like autumn mist over Kent's hills. Hargrove Manor revived under careful stewardship, apples ripening in abundance. Eleanor, at 21, bloomed into her role, not as Marchioness by title alone, but partner in legacy. Alexander, 35 and whole, found joy in shared glances, the grief's weight lifted by her light. One crisp evening, as they stood on the terrace overlooking the gardens, a legacy took shape. Below, the first pupils gathered for the school's opening, laughter rising on the breeze. Eleanor leaned into him, the ring glinting. "This is our horizon," she whispered. He smiled, drawing her close, and beyond. Yet a soft knock echoed from the hall, a letter from London, sealed with an unfamiliar crest. Rumours of Victor's distant kin stirring abroad, or merely a well-wisher's note. The future stretched wide, promising more than peace, adventures in alliance waiting just beyond the dawn. 5 years had woven their gentle threads through the tapestry of Ashford Hall, transforming the once shadowed estate into a haven of quiet abundance. The Kentish sun now rose over orchards, heavy with ripe apples, their branches bowing under the weight of a harvest that spoke of renewal. Eleanor Thorne, Marchioness of Ashford, stood at the nursery window, her hand resting on the swell of her belly, her third child due with the autumn leaves. At 26, time had softened the sharp edges of her youth, lending a serene grace to her features. Her dark curls, once pinned in restrained chignons, now fell loosely about her shoulders in the privacy of home, framed by the simple muslin gown that draped her form. its high waist accommodating the life within. Below, in the sun-dappled gardens, Alexander played with their two young ones. Edward, their eldest at 4, chased his sister Clara, named for Alexander's late wife, a tribute turned blessing, through the rose arbors. Laughter echoed, pure and unburdened, mingling with the trill of birds. Alexander, 39 now, moved with the easy strength of a man unbowed by past grief. His grey eyes, once shadowed, sparkled as he scooped Clara into his arms, spinning her until her giggles pealed like bells. The lines of loss had faded, replaced by the warmth of fatherhood and a love that had deepened, not dimmed, with the years. Their union, sealed in a modest ceremony at the village church 6 months after Victor's downfall, had blossomed beyond the scandal's ashes. No grand London wedding. They had chosen intimacy, surrounded by the Kentish faithful who had witnessed their triumph. Vows exchanged under the same oaks that flanked the hall, with Thomas as best man, his lanky frame now filled out by university studies in Oxford. The ring on Eleanor's finger, plain gold still, caught the light as she watched, a symbol of choices freely made, enduring as the hills. Hargrove Manor thrived a few miles away, its debts long cleared by Victor's forfeits and Alexander's prudent investments. Lord Reginald, sobered by remorse, had retreated from society, tending the ledgers with a diligence born of redemption. No more cards or brandy-fueled nights. He found solace in grandchildren's visits, his jowly face lighting at Edward's romps through the orchards. "You've saved us all, daughter," he would say, voice gravelly with emotion, clasping her hand. Thomas, 21, and affianced to a bright-eyed scholar's daughter, managed the estate with fresh vision, reforms in crop rotation, a small schoolhouse mirroring Ashford's, where village children learned letters under Eleanor's guidance. Aunt Miriam, in her cosy cottage on the grounds, had become the family's steadfast heart. Widowed life suited her. She doted on the children with tales from her Bible and needles flashing through embroidery samplers. Propriety and love, hand in hand, she often quipped. Her severe bun softened by silver strands. The social weave of Ashford by Kent had mended seamlessly. Mrs. Cartwright hosted endless teas, her gossip now tales of pride in our Marchioness's charities. Miss Lydia, wed to a local vicar, collaborated on the Widows' Fund Eleanor championed, a legacy from her mother's letters, aiding families against predatory debts. Even the neutral widow Jenkins wove baskets for the school, her quiet support blooming into lifelong friendship. Victor's shadow lingered only as a cautionary whisper, a high price paid in exile's bitterness. Letters from the continent arrived sporadically. Pleas for aid, ignored. He scraped by in Vienna, his schemes reduced to petty cons, the once sharp features gaunt in imagined portraits. No return to England's shores. The magistrate's warrant ensured it. His fall evoked no pity, only a collective sigh of relief. The community's scars healed by the thorn's steady hand. Eleanor descended the stairs, the house's familiar creaks like old friends. The library, expanded with shelves groaning under new volumes, awaited. Sense and sensibility still held pride of place. Its pages yellowed from shared readings. Alexander entered from the garden, children trailing, mud-streaked and beaming. He wiped his brow, coat discarded, shirt sleeves rolled to reveal forearms tanned from estate work. "They've claimed another victim," he said with a grin, lifting Edward onto his shoulders. "The roses bow to their conquest." Clara toddled to Eleanor, arms outstretched. "Mama, Papa says stories now." Eleanor knelt, enveloping her in a hug, the scent of earth and innocence filling her senses. Alexander's gaze met hers over the children's heads, deep, knowing, laced with the nostalgia of trials overcome. "Shall we?" he murmured, extending a hand. They gathered by the hearth, fire crackling softly against the cooling evening. Alexander read from a new Austen, his voice resonant, drawing the children close. Eleanor leaned against him, her head on his shoulder, feeling the steady beat of his heart. Love had resisted time's pull, growing roots in shared joys and quiet strengths. Grief's echoes remained, but they harmonized now with laughter, with the patter of small feet, with dreams of the child yet to come. A son, perhaps, to carry the Thorn name forward. As dusk painted the windows gold, Thomas arrived unannounced, his betrothed on his arm. Supper followed in the dining hall, voices overlapping in warmth, plans for the harvest festival, tales of Oxford exploits. Reginald joined later, his carriage rumbling up the drive, bearing a basket of early apples. "For the little ones," he said, eyes misty. The table brimmed with life, silver glinting under candlelight, a far cry from shadowed wages. Later, as the children slept and the house hushed, Eleanor and Alexander walked the terrace. Stars wheeled overhead, the Kentish night alive with crickets. 5 years, she whispered, hand on her belly, from thorns to this. He drew her close, lips brushing her temple. And more to come. You've given me a world reborn. Their kiss lingered soft and profound, sealing the epilogue of their saga. Below, the schoolhouse lights flickered, legacies in motion, futures unfolding. No loose threads tugged, only peace, nostalgic and full, stretched toward the horizon. As the stars twinkled above Ashford Hall, that fateful night 5 years past, Eleanor and Alexander stood together on the terrace, their hands entwined, gazing out over the Kentish hills that had witnessed their trials and triumphs. The air carried the sweet promise of apple blossoms, a reminder that from the darkest roots, beauty could flourish. Their story, born of a desperate wager and woven through scandals and secrets, had unfolded like one of those cherished novels on the library shelves, a tale of resilience, where love emerged not as a prize, but as a hard-won partnership. What lessons linger in their journey? First, that true freedom is claimed through courage, not granted by circumstance. Eleanor, once a silent observer in her father's shadowed world, learned to wield her voice, turning whispers of doubt into declarations of truth. She showed us that a woman's strength lies not in submission to society's rigid codes, but in challenging them with grace and intellect. Alexander, haunted by loss, discovered that vulnerability forges deeper bonds than stoic isolation. His grief, once a barrier, became a bridge to empathy and renewal. And Victor, his downfall teaches the peril of envy unchecked. Ambition twisted into malice poisons the soul, leaving only exile and regret. In Regency England's gilded cages, where debts and reputations danced on a knife's edge, their saga reminds us that justice prevails when the innocent unite against deceit. Honor is not inherited, it is built, one defiant choice at a time. Yet beyond the drama, their love endures as the heart of it all, a quiet revolution against the era's constraints. From that ill-fated poker game to the laughter of children in the gardens, they proved that alliances born of necessity can bloom into profound devotion. Eleanor and Alexander did not merely survive, they transformed their world, leaving legacies of education, compassion, and equality that rippled through Kent and beyond. If this tale of heartbreak turned to hope has stirred your soul, share your thoughts in the comments below. What moment resonated most with you? The library's intimate revelations, the ballroom's triumphant stand, or the epilogue's warm embrace? And to show you've journeyed to the end with me, write the word thorn in your comment. It'll help spread this story to fellow lovers of historical romance. Your words fuel more adventures like this one. Don't forget to like if the twists kept you hooked, and subscribe for a library of similar sagas. Forbidden loves in misty moors, scandalous duels under London fog, and resilient hearts conquering all. Click the cards now for your next escape into the past. Until our next tale unfolds, remember, in every wager, the greatest stake is the heart. Thank you for joining Eleanor and Alexander. Their freedom is ours to cherish.